Hey, let's talk about negative space. Negative space is what's around an object. Here's your positive space. All of that's your negative space. Negative space is just as important as positive space. Doesn't seem like it because it seems empty, but it still says a lot in your composition. Using the negative space of your picture, it makes things balanced. It establishes relationships between objects. It can create tension. It can give you focal points. It is very important to be able to see and use correctly. So our exercise today kind of is about seeing that space and filling it in. I use it a lot when I'm making my spooky cats. This is a lot of negative space happening and filling that in. For our exercise, you can use 3 different things. Number 1, you can grab some watercolors and some watercolor paper. If you don't have watercolor paper on hand, a heavy cardstock will be fine. Number 2, you can use colored pencils, my favorite, and some regular paper. And with that, you'd be learning more about layering, color mixing, and things like that. Number 3, you can just grab a pencil, just a normal pencil, and some paper and work on your pressure and how to establish a full range of values in pencil. So there's a few different skills you could be working on here. It's good practice, and you end up making something kind of pretty anyway, and that's part of the fun. All right, so follow along. It's gonna be pretty quick, but I think you'll get the hang of it really fast. All right, awesome. So grab your watercolors, your watercolor paper, a brush, and you're gonna need a pencil to draw with for this part. Give yourself a rectangle on the square to work with. It's good to always set some sort of boundaries to work within. And you're gonna wanna draw some simple shapes. I'm going to be drawing trees, because I love trees, but you can pick pretty much any sort of simple shapes. You're not going to fill in the entire rectangle yet. You're just going to create a few positive shapes, and we're going to be filling in with paint the negative space around them and adding more to it. Leaves work well if you don't feel like doing trees. You could do squiggly lines. The most important thing is to keep it pretty simple right now. And once you understand what this exercise is, you'll probably have a whole bunch of ideas for yourself that I didn't even mention. The next part is to fill in your negative space with your watercolors. Work from a light color to a dark color. So I'm going to be working from yellow to red to like a rose color to a blue. And you're going to want to dilute your paint enough so you can get a nice wash in the background and paint all of your negative space around the trees that you just drew. It doesn't have to be the most even application of paint at this time, but definitely use this time to kind of work on your watercolor skills and see how even you can coat the paper with this paint. I was definitely not working with the right size brush. I should have grabbed something bigger, so my paint got really streaky really fast. I'm sure you're going to do a better job than I did. You're going to want to let this coat dry, and it shouldn't take too long unless you put a ton of water in there. Once it's dry, you're going to draw in a few more trees. Just another simple few shapes, and what you're going to do is then we're going to paint around these. I think you could probably start seeing a pattern. We're just going to be drawing different shapes, and then you're going to be painting around those shapes. And what's nice about watercolors is they layer transparently, so as you add different color paints on top, those undercolors are showing through, and this is going to give you a really nice idea of color mixing and how watercolor paints layer on each other and affect different layers underneath and on top. So you can definitely see how streaky my paint is here, and I'm not proud of this, but you know what? Again, you'll do better than I did. I think I made this video at like 10 at night. It was late. My kid was asleep in the next room. So we're on our next coat, and just a few more trees drawn there in the background. You are creating positive shapes when you're doing this, and then you are going to paint the negative area around it. And you can see that you can overlap and let them cross in front and behind. What we're doing is giving a nice sense of depth to this composition. And as you layer colors, you're getting darker and darker in the background. We're just going to do one more layer here. And so just draw a few more trees, and I added a few little spooky cats in the background of mine. I have a nice layer of blue on here. It doesn't look blue, but that's because it's going over the red and it's making purple. So this exercise is really great if you want to see how your watercolors layer on top of each other. It's also going to help you with composition as you make the choices as to where to put your new trees in each layer. The next exercise is going to be the same thing, but we're going to use pencils instead. So you can use colored pencils or just a regular pencil. In this case, I used similar colors that I did with the watercolors. So I worked from a yellow to a red to like a deeper plum to a violet with my colored pencils. Regular pencil, I just grabbed a 3B. It was what I had laying around. Again, you're going to want to give yourselves a square or a rectangle to work in. Give yourself some parameters. Make them pretty small this time, or else you're going to be spending all day filling in with pencil. So again, just give yourself your tree shapes or whatever shapes you're working with and fill in the background. You're going to want to use pretty light pressure with your colored pencils, or else you're not going to be able to get as many layers. So very light pressure until you get to the last layer. And again, try to work a little more evenly than I did. Mine's a little sketchy right now. Your last layer of colored pencil, that's when you can put a lot of pressure in and get it nice and dark in the background there. Once you're done with the colored pencil, if you want to move on to regular pencil, same thing applies. Draw your tree shapes or your other shapes and fill in your negative space one layer at a time using light pressure to begin with. And keep that light pressure up as you build layers, and what you're doing is you're going to be building value this whole time. So really light layers. Don't push hard now. This is good practice for those students of mine who can't help but put a ton of pressure on their pencil to begin with. You can increase the pressure as you go along, and you see you're establishing some really great range of values. Last layer now, give it a lot of pressure so it gets nice and dark. Using pencils for this exercise is great if you want to work on establishing ranges of values, seeing how colored pencils layer and change the color on top of each other, and it's just really good practice for a technique as well as composition and working with negative space. I hope this exercise helped you understand negative space a little better. I'll be doing one more video about this concept where I'll talk a little bit more about practical applications of it.